This season, Instacart has your back to school. As in, they've got your back to school lunch favorites, like snack packs and fresh fruit. And they've got your back to school supplies, like backpacks, binders, and pencils. And they've got your back when your kid casually tells you they have a huge school project due tomorrow. Let's face it, we were all that kid. So first call your parents to say I'm sorry, and then download the Instacart app to get delivery in as fast as 30 minutes all school year long. Get a $0 delivery fee for your first 3 orders while supplies last. Minimum $10 per order. Additional terms apply.
And welcome back to Scarred for Life, the podcast where we open up old wounds by looking back at the films that scared us as kids. I'm Terry.
And I'm Mary Beth.
And each episode, our special guest brings with them a movie that traumatized them as a child.
This week, we're very excited because our guest is Jenna Kanell. I didn't butcher it as badly as I did the last time we spoke. I don't know why. It makes my brain hurt. But they are the actor and co-writer of the new film Faceless After Dark. You've also seen Jenna in films such as Terrifier, Renfield, and Night of the Missing. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. You didn't butcher it at all this time. You got to trust
I get in
yourself.
my head about name pronunciations for some reason. I freeze every time. I'm just like,
I just forget names entirely.
Yeah, as someone with the last name Menard, but it's spelled Mesnard, I am very focused on getting people's names right.
Yeah, I literally never would have guessed that that's how your name was pronounced. Looking at it.
There you go.
Yay.
It's an easy way of figuring out if people are telemarketers or if I don't know them, because they'll just completely butcher my last name. But anyway,
it's a vetting process. I love that.
There you go. But welcome to the show. We're really excited to chat with you. For our listeners that might not be aware, can you tell them? Oh my God, words are hard today.
Words are so hard.
Can you explain to our listeners what Faceless After Dark is about?
I would be happy to. Faceless After Dark starts as a meta home invasion thriller when a fan breaks into an actor's home trying to create the plot of the movie, but it quickly becomes something very different. And I don't want to say too much more because I think it's better to go in blind.
It sure is.
Because I would also vaguely.
Yeah, because I watched it after I was reading the IMDb synopsis. Like, okay, and I watched it and I was like, oh, this is going in places I was not expecting. So absolutely keeping it. This is one of those movies you want to go in kind of blind on.
Yeah, and I'm happy that you had that reaction. That's what we want. I want you to every 10 minutes be wondering, what the fuck did I sign up for?
Yep.
What's happening? Where is this going? How did I get here?
Hell yeah.
Absolutely. And it does. It's great.
Thank you.
Well, and so I think I know the answer, but I'm going to ask like I don't. So was this inspired by your own experiences, like being a part of a big horror franchise and kind of being known for being in a franchise, especially for one that is so violent,
divisive?
Violent, to put it kind of neutrally.
Yes, that was very diplomatic of you. Very well handled. The short answer is yes. I'm not a murderer, so that part is, I guess, spoiler alert. I'm not a murderer in real life.
Oh, cool! Thank you for clearing that up. I appreciate that.
I feel the need to clarify.
That's why we had you here today, to clear up the rumors.
I let the records show there are not bodies scattered around my house in various stages of disrepair. But other than that, yes, it's absolutely meant to be inspired. I mean, it's a fictionalized version of me and of certain events, but there are certainly a lot of things that I take from real life and from real experiences. And there are definitely it's meant to be the sort of thing that you can enjoy if you've never seen Terrifier or if you don't like Terrifier. It's also the sort of thing where if you do like Terrifier, there are going to be a couple little nods and Easter eggs in there for you.
Yeah. And I think it's one of these movies that I think really does confront the way that people look at actors, especially female actors or female appearing actors in horror, which we all know about. But I don't think people always think about the real world implications of what happens to female and female presenting characters or the people that play them. And I was curious if was this I mean, it obviously wasn't easy to dig into that, but like, was there catharsis for you in both writing and acting? I can imagine, but like that experience must have been cathartic and so difficult at the same time, digging into yourself like that.
Yeah, absolutely. It was absolutely both of those things. I mean, yeah, it's meant to sort of be an examination of the way we commodify people, and also the way we engage with parasocial relationships and feel a sense of familiarity, because the internet is beautiful in that it creates a community and familiarity, but it's also a very dangerous place because it creates community and familiarity. And we're really evolved apes that are meant to eat berries in a cave. And we're not necessarily meant to be walking around with a computer in our pocket at all times that at any given moment is telling us all of the atrocities occurring everywhere around the world. And so there's a lot of catharsis in that. I do deal with depression and anxiety and anger issues myself in real life, and have found healthy ways of engaging with those things and getting that energy out. But this was a way of examining, what if there was a person who didn't, and obviously there are lots of people who don't. What does it look like to be someone who has nothing left to lose? And so there's something very cathartic about that, because there are things that I would never do in real life, but have certainly daydreamed about, or would find a lot of fun, or wish that someone would do, maybe necessarily. There are also parts that I would never endorse anyone doing, and then at the same time, there are parts that were hard to engage with, because it was a sort of like forced unraveling and examination of all of that stuff and all of those feelings, and bringing it all to the surface in front of a bunch of people.
Yeah. I'm glad that you had that experience, I guess, to kind of process all of that, like as an actor, as a writer, and to get an experience to write a feature. Is this your first feature that you've written?
It is not my first feature that I've written, but it's the first feature I've written that's gotten made.
Okay. Well, congratulations. That's huge in and of itself.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
That's awesome.
So,
Terry, I'm so sorry I cut you off.
No, I come also from the world of video games, where like I've been a huge gamer my entire life. And so seeing the way this kind of ties into what Mary Beth was and you both were talking about, where I remember when The Last of Us Part 2 came out as a video game, and there was like a small but very vocal contingent of fans of the series that attacked the actress that was playing the sort of villain in that. And so I don't know, I find it so horrifyingly fascinating, the way in which parasocial relationships online and the way in which the internet sort of can amplify those negative voices against particularly female people and queer people and people of color. It sucks. And so seeing this and sort of kind of seeing both the thought process from your character, but also you also kind of brought this up, the fact that there is so much happening everywhere all at once that is just horrible. Like there's moments in the film where we get shots of news reports, or shots of like Google searches of all the horrible things that are kind of happening in the world. It's a lot to deal with. And so I just wanted to kind of dig into that and get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and you're right. I mean, think about John Boyega when his Star Wars movie came out. It's like we have and I'm guilty of this too. We have this sense of ownership and this sense of entitlement to the intellectual property that we hold dear. And there's something good to be said about that, because, art is for us to put ourselves in. And there's something magical about feeling that deep an attachment to something creative. And also, the internet provides this sort of anonymity for people to say things that you would never actually say to someone to their face, because you don't have to face any sort of consequences. It's taken away consequences, and it's trained us to expect everything right now, and to have no sense of, that there's a full-fledged human being on the other side of this thing.
Yep.
And especially if that person, because, what we put on the internet is very curated. I mean, I purposefully and very openly do that. My Instagram is purposefully curated because I use it for marketing and for sharing what I'm doing, and for using it as my voice and being my own publicist in a lot of ways. But we forget that when we look at other people's pages and think that everything is perfect. And when you hurl something at someone, we're never considering that they might be fighting something we have no idea about.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
I'm also curious because when I'm just looking at your IMDb page and the bio talks about you being kind of doing a lot of stunts. What is it like being a stunt person?
So I am technically an action actor because
Okay.
stunt performers are very, very particular about that being their title. And
Okay.
I don't want to take that away from them because they do insane stuff. So an action actor just means that I'm an actor who does my own stunts, essentially.
Okay.
So I mean, some people
Oh.
would be fine with me calling myself a stunt performer, but I've been told I'm supposed to make that distinction, so I want to be respectful.
Gotcha.
Okay.
No, I get it.
But I love stunts. The action sequences are some of my absolute favorite things to do. They're so much fun, and I love when I get to be physical. And I've done my own stunts in just about everything.
Wow.
That's so cool. Damn.
Thank you.
That's so badass.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. I know that, like, a lot of like your career is in the genre, but are you yourself a genre fan? Is that something you liked when you were younger? Or is that kind of the thing that was in your life at all?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I didn't choose to enter into genre on purpose. It just sort of happened. But that
Yeah.
being said, I've always been a genre fan. I mean, I've been watching horror movies ever since I was probably too young to be watching them.
Do you remember
Always.
your first introduction to the horror genre?
I want to say, I don't know if I remember my very first, but among the first ones, I mean, the original Blair Witch was certainly up there. But just because I remember it really stood out to me the way that they had this like meta marketing campaign where the line between reality and fiction was very much blurred, and I thought
Yeah.
that was I just had never seen something like that, and that really stuck with me. And then honestly, I want to say maybe I was in either middle school or high school when Paranormal Activity came out, and
Mm,
similarly, like that movie fucked me up. Like
Yep. Yep.
same.
because it's still like if I watch it, it will still like I will not sleep because I think I had been inundated even already by that point by so much CG and so many effects, and to have something that minimalist and that realistic and that grounded was really hard for me to sit with, but I fucking loved it. But then on the other end of that spectrum, like the complete opposite of minimalism, my absolute favorite horror film of all time is John Carpenter's The Thing.
Ah,
It's like
it's perfection.
it's
It's like the
perfection.
best
It
movie,
ages
so.
like a fine wine. It's so
It really
good.
does.
It gets
Yeah.
better every time I watch it, and I watch it all the time. It's such a good movie.
Yeah,
Are you easily scared as an adult still when you watch horror movies?
it depends.
Okay.
Not really, but once in a while I'll see something that will just like crawl under my skin. I don't know why, but distended mouths really mess me up. Like when someone's mouth is bigger than it's supposed to be. I don't know what it is about that. I
So
can't
smile
handle it.
really got you, is what you're saying. The
Yeah.
weird mouth.
Well, I don't mind when it goes horizontally. It's when it goes vertically. That's when I get upset.
Okay.
But I
Okay,
understand the
that's fair.
confusion because there's absolutely no logic behind this fear. Like it's nothing based in logic at all. So once in a while, like something like that will, or like actually the last movie I saw that really messed me up in a way that I haven't been in a long time was Talk to Me.
Yeah, yeah.
This
I think-
particularly, yeah.
I think that is a movie that whenever we ask this question is going to start popping up a whole lot more. It is good, but I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, not at all. I mean, absolutely. I think the kids that see that now, that's going to be their scarred for life movie. Absolutely. I'm already too damaged to be further scarred, but it still did mess me up. I mean, like that, and I saw it. I was at Overlook Film Festival last year with Renfield, and the festival said, "Oh, we're going to have this midnight screening. It's a surprise screening. You're not going to know what it is." It's an A24 movie. We had no idea what we were walking into, and it turned out to be Talk to Me. I had heard nothing about it, which is the best way to see a movie, especially a horror movie. I knew nothing. And like that scene, the one part that like still like haunts some part of me is where they like smash to the kid and he's stuck in that place where his body is perfectly still, but then they smash to the place and he's just like screaming and experiencing like this insane, unimaginable agony. That or likewise the very, very ending of Saint Maud. I mean, things like that. There's the power in editing can really get me.
That last shot is one of the best last shots in a horror movie I've ever seen.
It's so good. It literally the movie could have been anything before that, but the way it ends, flawless. Rose Glass is, I'm so excited for her career.
Have you
Yeah,
seen Love Lies
same.
Bleeding?
I loved Love Live Bleeding.
It's
I
so
really
good.
fucking loved it. Yeah. And it's so
Gnarly.
different. They're such
Yeah.
different movies. So
I
I
know.
can't wait to see what she makes next. I'm so stoked.
I watched that in a movie theater full of queer non-binary people
Oh my
and like
God.
women, and everyone was just like hooting and hollering. It was potentially one of the best theater going experiences I've ever had in my
Oh,
entire life. Just
I
all
love
queer
that.
people. It was great. Anyway, so we've talked about Faces After Dark and a little bit of your horror history, but Jenna, what film did you bring with you today for us to discuss?
I have brought as a sacrifice for the coven Donnie Darko.
Oh, poor
yes.
Donnie.
Oh,
Rip.
In Donnie Darko, a film that also fucked me up as a kid, so I'm very excited to talk about this. After narrowly escaping a bizarre accident, a troubled teen, played by Jake Gyllenhaal, is plagued by visions of a man in a
oh.
large rabbit suit who manipulates him to commit a series of crimes.
I don't think I've ever actually heard the synopsis.
Yeah. That is courtesy of IMDb.
As I was reading it, I'm like, this is such a weird way to describe this movie, but that is exactly what happens.
Yeah.
I mean,
No.
it is. It's so funny that this was because I'm 43. Yes, 43. So like I was a little older when this came out, but it's funny to hear people's reactions to it because my only reaction to it was how attracted I was to Jake Gyllenhaal. But anyway, take us back,
Fair.
Jenna. How
Fair.
old were you when you saw this? How did you see it? Let's set the stage. Why is this your Scarred for Life pick?
Sure. So I think I was 14 when I saw it. And I saw it in a group of other teens. It was at some like youth group something or other.
Always the youth groups.
Always
Always the
youth
youth
groups.
groups.
Nothing but bad news in those youth groups. Like when youth get together, it can only be
There's nothing
havoc.
godly about those gatherings.
Same. Like
Anyways.
lock-ins, forget about it. Yeah. So it was at some sort of group of youths that in which I saw it. And I just remember because I had seen horror movies before then. Because when I first got into horror movies, it was because when I first started having periods, they were such a nightmare. Like I was in so much pain, I was bleeding so much that I was having to stay home from school for a couple days every month. And so I would just watch horror movies that were on television that I probably shouldn't have been watching because I was alone. And it was this sort of like one of the reasons I love horror is because it like took me out of my own pain for a couple hours at a time. So I had already gotten into horror by the time I saw Donnie Darko. So it wasn't like it was the first horror movie that I had seen or the first one to scar me. But there was something about it that was so different from the others because I don't even know if a lot of people would classify it as horror, but I really feel like it is. It's almost existential horror. And it kicked off what I now have identified as a problem in terms of my love for time movies that have to do with time, like time loops, multiple worlds, interpretation, theory of eternal return. Like I've ended up becoming a huge nerd about that stuff. And now there are a bunch of movies in that vein. But that was the first one I saw where that one was, I want to say that was the first movie I ever saw or the first horror movie I ever saw where it wasn't that I was super scared while it was happening, but after the fact, I couldn't shake it off. I couldn't shake off this feeling of being unsettled and being followed and feeling like maybe things weren't real.
Wow. So a very existential type of dread that isn't necessarily tied to a specific scene, but sort of just the overall feeling of the movie. I mean, because the movie it has like a doomsday clock literally counting down to the end of the world.
Doomsday clock.
So,
yes.
Right.
Yeah. And I will say, if anyone hasn't seen it or if anyone is thinking about rewatching it, I personally recommend watching the director's cut.
Okay, I was going to ask.
I watched the director's cut for this episode,
and I haven't seen the director's cut. I because it was so late when I started watching it last night. I was like, I don't know if I can stay up for 2 hours and 20 minutes. I was like, I'm going to stick with the original cut. So the director's cut is the way to go, though, you think?
I think so. I mean, it's not hugely different. There are some little tiny things that are different. The biggest difference is that it's kind of broken up into these sections in which he pulls excerpts from Roberta Sparrow, her book, from Grandmother Time, her book, and it kind of punctuates the whole thing. And it's a really
Okay.
nice touch because it makes it more obvious what the movie's about. Like it makes it a little less vague in terms of some of the theories about the like alternate ending theory of time. But in a way it's more, I don't know. I kind of like that about it. I don't mind. I don't feel like it's expositional. It's just kind of
Okay.
added a flavor to it.
Yeah, because I watched the director's cut this time too, and it's like it's still kind of inscrutable. Like the
Yeah.
text excerpts that they use,
It doesn't spell it out.
it
It
doesn't
doesn't spoon
really
feed it to
help.
you.
It just kind
No.
of like you can kind of vaguely get an idea of like where you're progressing next, but it's not necessarily being like this is exactly what's happening because it's again written like a kind of
Almost like a textbook.
yeah, it's like a textbook written by a woman who believes in quantum physics. Well, not believes,
Right.
but like is an expert in quantum physics and interdimensional travel.
Yes.
Question mark?
Very much that.
Yes,
Well put.
very much that. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
It's wild to me because I think I saw this. I'm trying to remember my relationship to it because I didn't see it when it came out in theaters. I don't even know if it played where I'm at when it came out. And so I remember people talking about it and there was like hubbub about it. And so I remember renting it on DVD at the time and sitting down and watching it and being completely confused as to why everyone really liked it. I will be honest, but when I first
It's a
saw it,
weird movie.
I was like, I don't get what people, because like everyone was talking, like all the people, it was a cult classic, so like everyone was talking about it. Oh, this is the movie you need to see. It'll fuck you up, that kind of stuff. And I remember sitting and going, I don't like Jake Gyllenhaal, okay, but other than that, I was like, I'm not getting it. But I will. So I have not seen it since probably 2002, 2003. So it's been 20 odd years, and I gotta say, rewatching it last night, this movie is really good.
I love it. Like the way it's shot, the score, the acting. I also, and I feel like one of the reasons it's kind of culty is because there's this sort of dark humor woven throughout it, which, you know, Faceless After Dark is I wouldn't compare the two movies in any way. It's a very different movie. But that being said, I think one of the reasons that we like that people in the UK have already kind of latched onto it is which similarly happened with Donnie Darko. It did better in the UK than it did in America, is that there's this sort of like dark humor woven throughout it
Mhm.
and almost like genre bending, which a lot of people here, especially like bigger studios, are kind of afraid of, but is really mainstream in markets like Korea. I love that sort of thing. It's Donnie Darko is not afraid to dip into different genres and to like use humor at times when it feels inappropriate, but it totally works.
I agree. That's what surprised me on this rewatch is how funny this movie actually is. And the dialogue in it is just it's so good. I just don't think I had maybe the emotional competency for it back then. Because I would have been when it came out, I would have been like 20. And I think I just was like, oh, this is not good. I don't know. I felt like I was very dismissive back in the early aughts. So like rewatching this, I was prepared going, am I gonna really like it? And I was genuinely surprised at how much A, I forgot about the movie, and B, how funny it was, and C, how good it is. I love how inscrutable it is because I feel like cinema today, there's a lot of people, if it isn't completely spelled out for audiences, a lot of times there's like, well, what's it about? Oh, it doesn't really say anything. And I watching it now, I'm like, I appreciate the fact that there is probably truth in what is being told here, but for audiences, it's completely open to your interpretation. And I don't know, it felt very kind of nostalgic for a time that cinema was, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it came out at a time when it was, well, I want to say, first of all, I think part of the reason maybe you didn't like it at first was also, I think people's expectations really affect the way we ingest things. You
Yeah.
know, like if someone's like, "Oh, this is so crazy," like you're expecting something insane, and really it's much more of like an under the surface sort of burn. And I wonder if that's part of it. But
Yeah.
also, you're right. A lot of movies are afraid to, especially now, and even then, are afraid to treat audiences as intelligent and as capable of extrapolating from incomplete data. And that movie is not afraid to just let people be fucking confused.
You mentioned earlier, Mary Beth, that this was a scarring movie for you too. I'm curious about your reaction to this, because when did you see it?
So it's like a very weirdly specific memory because I
Ooh.
remember I was at my friend's birthday party. We were in fifth grade, and I was like the fourth person to ask if I could sleep over because no one else was allowed to sleep over. And I was like, oh my God, she's finally gonna ask me to sleep over. Like she was a cool girl, and I was like so excited to spend the night at her house. And we got to watch the Chappelle Show, which is it just obviously aged terribly now, but like I was so excited to watch like Comedy Central specials late at night. But I had an older brother in high school, and he was watching Donnie Darko in the morning. And I came downstairs and saw that fucking rabbit on the screen, and I almost shit my pants. And like I had been watching horror stuff already, but like that rabbit like shifted something in my psyche to the point where I could not stop thinking about Donnie Darko, but I never wanted to watch it. Like there was something about the rabbit that felt so deeply disgusting and uncanny that like it was like number one object of terror for me. Like one time I saw someone wearing a Frank the Rabbit shirt and at a supermarket, and I had to go the other direction. Like it like fucked up my little brain, like my fifth grade brain. It like just destroyed it. And I finally saw it. And I was like, that was cool, but I don't really understand what the fuck just happened. It was like, it's always on those lists of like most confusing movies of all time, like most crazy, weird movies. And I remember watching it and being like, this is so fucking freaky. Like, if there was a man. And then when I found out that there was a man whose eye had been shot out under, I was like, that's even fucking worse. Like, that's even worse than the rabbit. It's a corpse. And so, I had watched it, and it was really one of these like watched once, never want to watch again movies, because it really did like kind of existentially like fuck me up even when I watched it in my 20s.
Yeah.
And then watching it today, I cried at the end. I was like, what is happening? Like I cried. All of a sudden I fell into this hole because when I first watched it, like I was obviously viscerally afraid of the imagery. And then I was kind of like, this is weird and I don't like it, but I don't know why. And now I'm watching it and I'm like, everything is planned and everything is just laid out for us and there's no such thing as like freedom of choice. And I got stuck in my own head about that today. So, we're obviously doing
I would
great
love
here.
to talk about that. And also I love the arc that you've had. Next time you watch it, you're going to be like, I hate it. It's the worst thing I've ever seen. Like you basically are like having a different stage of grief every time you watch the film, it sounds like.
But like I also knew it for the memes. Like this movie, because it came out in 2001 and like, Jenna, I'm sure, like, I think we're probably a similar age. Like, I grew up with the memes of people making fun of, like, a lot of the characters, like some really racist memes about the one character who, like...
Christina Chen.
Yes, Christina Chen's character. And, like, how, obviously they're being fucking terrible in the movie. And it continued outside of the movie. Like, no one really seemed to understand, like, hey, guys, that was what you took from this, was, like, making fun of the Asian character still.
Right.
So watching it now and just seeing the memes and like the kind of weird incelly fanboy base that has kind of emerged around this movie is also very interesting because I feel like this movie is so opposite of, I guess.
Well, it's that sort of thing where I think some people take like the sort of people that are into the concept of the lone wolf, which in reality doesn't exist. Wolves live in families. There aren't alphas. That's not how that works in nature, but that's a TED Talk for a different day. But I think the type of people who believe in that sort of rhetoric, I think find that in it, even though that's not at all what the movie is saying. That's not the takeaway, but if you are looking for that, if that's your confirmation bias, I could see someone finding that, even though that's not at all what the movie is not glorifying him for that at all.
And I think it just like clicked something in my mind. And I think this might be why I didn't like it also, is because the people that were talking about it were very much the dude bro kind of people that were watching Fight Club and not understanding what Fight Club is actually about.
That's another great example. Exactly. Yeah.
I think that might have been some of my initial hesitancy, is because the people that seemed to embrace it were people that I didn't feel comfortable being around, if that makes sense.
No, that makes perfect sense.
This is the movie that American Beauty wanted to be. Is that a weird statement to make? I feel like there are parts of this movie that feel so similar to American Beauty in terms of like this like stylized look at like the suburbs, but this one,
Yeah.
Donnie Darko, is so much darker. And I think I think both really speak to like loneliness and how we all feel so isolated from each other and how like it's so easy to exist alone and how important it is to like find community. And I think this movie speaks to that, but just in like a more honest and less like give me the Oscar way, I guess. Because
yeah, that's interesting. I would never have put them in the same category, but they do feel like they are both of the same era. And that definitely makes sense of like, what does, once you've satisfied all your basic needs, what does self-actualization look like? And it's funny because American Beauty used to be one of my favorite movies.
Me too.
I know. And we all saw how that has aged. But so I haven't rewatched it because you can't, he's the main character. So
and he's so fucking gross in the movie too. Like his character is so nasty. And
it'd be one thing if you knew he were acting.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. It's so funny because like that was one of my first purchases from Amazon was the script for American Beauty and Magnolia, because
I have American Beauty the script as well, because it's a great script.
It's a great script, but in college, that was like my personality was Magnolia and American Beauty at the time, because I was like, this is the most perfect art ever existing. So it's so funny that you bring this up.
That's funny. I was just like watching this movie thinking so much about how it's like almost parodying like teen movies. You know what I mean? Like, especially in the moments where it's like the music montages in the high school with the girls doing the dance and everyone at their lockers. It also gave me Virgin Suicide vibes a little bit with kind of the way it's filmed, like a little bit kind of that hazy, again, because this is a weird outer dimension that isn't whatever. I don't know what it actually is, but on another dimension.
We should get to that at some point, because you're going to see how much of a fucking dweeb I am.
No, I want to hear it so bad, because I'm like, they're in another dimension that's not the actual dimension, whatever, that's fine. Who knows? I want to hear what you think, because I don't really know. But it has this kind of unreal vibe to it that, again, like pulls from the teen like comedy genre, but puts it in such a fucked up setting. And I love it. How it's like, this isn't like the cutesy story where everyone like is cute and he's not going to have the happy romance at the end. Like, this isn't the girl gets the guy. This is like, nah, this is more real life. And
no, it's not.
Again, that's kind of darkly funny, because they definitely darkly play with that. And it is hilarious in the most fucked up way when you're like, I see what we're doing here.
Oh, absolutely. Well, because it's one of the few movies that I feel actually is about teens and actually speaks in a way to the teen experience. Yes, and maybe that's part of why it resonated with me so much at the time, because I was, as a teen, I didn't know what my depression was. I just knew like something was wrong, but I hadn't like gotten into therapy yet. And I hadn't started, all the things I do now, like martial arts and like journaling and meditating and therapy and like all of the coping mechanisms I have in place, and community and a sense of belonging and a sense of purpose. And also I was going through puberty. So I feel like, and maybe that's part of, Terry, like what you were saying of, I mean, so much about why movies stick with us is where we are when we see them, because it's such a subjective experience. So that's totally part of it too. And obviously I appreciate it for different reasons now, but I think that was part of it, is that I understood the feeling, because so many teen movies don't address how deeply angry a lot of teenagers are and how deeply unhappy a lot of teenagers are. And I certainly was both of those things. On top of like, your body changing and the people around you trying to get you to fit in a certain way and be a certain way. And that's the other thing, is that like so many people in the sort of red pill culture see him as like, he's deeply unhappy and therefore he like commits this violent act. But in fact, he's deeply unhappy and therefore decides to, rather than just committing suicide, he does commit suicide but in a way that saves other people rather than hurting anybody else. Because that's the thing these fucking asshole mass shooters get wrong, is that they're like, I'm a martyr. No, you're not. You're murdering a bunch of innocent people. Whereas in Donnie Darko, he's a martyr, which isn't necessarily something aspirational at all, but he's doing it to save his entire family, and in his mind, at least, to save the town and his community.
Yeah, I think what you're kind of tapping into is something that I was feeling on this rewatch too, where I mean, in a way, I kind of was Donnie Darko in high school. It's like I was very withdrawn from the world. I was coming to terms. I was still, I mean, it took a long time for me to come to terms with my sexuality, but you know, when you're growing up in like the 90s and you are a little gay kid in the middle of the country. I live in the Midwest, and
Oh God.
you're just everything is very you know, Republican and very, you know, right wing leaning. And so the fact that here I was not feeling that I could be myself, and I was severely depressed all throughout my high school because I was grappling with something that I didn't want anyone else to know about me. So like watching this now felt very therapeutic. It's like I have gone through in a different way, but what Donnie was sort of dealing with and grappling with in terms of depression and severe, like doomsday, like you feel like the world, if when you're a teenager and you're angry and everything is like you're going through all of the, it feels like the world is ending. And so I do think that the movie does capture that feeling incredibly well.
Yeah. And you could even, it's interesting because I hadn't really thought of this before, but you saying that makes me feel like there's also a world in which there's a metaphor in there of like, because you're saying you were grappling with this part of yourself that no one else could see and you felt like you had to hide, almost like a giant man in a bunny costume.
Almost like, exactly.
Almost like there's a bunny following you around and you can't tell anyone about it because they'll think you're crazy, but you know he's there and he's telling you all this shit about yourself that you're uncomfortable with. We cracked the code, you guys.
We cracked the code.
There's a metaphor there. I've never thought about it that way. That's very cool.
That is cool.
The other thing that, and this is a memory that it unlocked watching this last night in a two-part way. So there's the part where we have the assembly and there's the girl team that is up there and they're dancing, right? And I'm watching this going, wow, when I was, I don't know, maybe 9 or 10, and I was being babysat by someone who had kids, and they had two daughters that were about my age, and so we were all kind of playing together, and I was sort of like trying to get them to do a dance routine that would get them on, as like a manager, to get them on Star Search. And so I'm sitting here thinking, boy, this takes me back to when I was a kid and doing that. And then what happens later? They're going to fucking Star Search, and I'm like, holy shit. That was me. And I didn't know I was gay at the time. How could I not? I was like trying to like choreograph their dance moves.
The writing was on the wall.
Terry, I'll never ever doubt your commitment to sparkle motion ever again.
Yes, there it is.
There we
go. Bam, get him. So good.
Oh my God. What? And I love that line so much.
It's so good. And there are all these comments on like religion and on tradition and on like the way that ideas are forced down. I mean, to go back to like the teen experience, which everyone who gets to live that long has had a version of that experience. And there's, you know, like the part where she's like, love and fear. And those are the only two choices. And he's asking questions because that's what teenagers do. And she's just, there's sort of this expectation of, you just have to believe this. I won't be explaining myself and you shouldn't ask any questions. And like, you know, there are a lot of adults that still don't question things. But there's so many like little things. And I mean,
yeah.
So good.
I know. It is a really smart movie. And then, like, you know, we have Patrick Swayze being a fucking cretin,
pedophile.
A pedophile with like just bunch of porn in his basement. And just, it really is just like, hey, being a teenager fucking sucks and no one ever wants to listen to you. And when you speak out, you get it. All you do is get in trouble. Because especially like when he goes up there and he's like, I think you're the Antichrist, which is my favorite line. When I saw this, finally saw it, I was like, I wish I had his balls, like going up and being like, I think you are the Antichrist is such an incredible insult to somebody. And like,
so good.
It's kind of like, he really kind of got him there because he is like kind of representative of everything that's wrong. Like you want to manipulate children and also you are disgusting.
Yeah.
And using someone like Patrick Swayze to be that character is also really smart because of how everyone, you know, he really plays into that trusting the attractive, successful white man, and then being like, ha, see, the white men are the scariest ones. They're the ones that have all the secrets.
Well, and the women that uphold him, because everyone can have ingrained misogyny. Everyone, it's for everybody. We're equal in this house, because like when even after they find all the kiddie porn in his house, the way the teacher defends him and says, "Oh, it's this like witch hunt. It's not real. It's not what you think." She's still defending him even after evidence, which we see all the time in reality.
Well, and she even like says like, "I'm not going to my daughter's dance thing because I have to defend the pedophile in court." And that's where the Sparkle Motion quote comes from, which I'm just like, this is so darkly hysterical. She's telling like, I can't take my daughter to her performance because I have to testify in court to support a pedophile, but you are the bitch for not going. Like,
correct. Yeah.
Also speaks so deeply to like the suburban white woman experience that I saw my mom go through a lot. Like, obviously exaggerated, but like it's pretty on the nose, like for how a lot of those people act.
I'm not surprised. I mean, I didn't grow up in the suburbs. I've always lived in cities, but I had friends who lived in the suburbs, and I remember thinking it's a strange sort of world out there. And Edward Scissorhands also came out not too far ahead of these movies, right? And that one was also kind of about the suburban experience and what it's like to be a freak among them.
Yeah. I think that's what I think surprised me, and we've kind of touched on this a little bit so far, is the way in which because like at time when this came out in 2001, so at that time there was like a huge surge of like Can't Hardly Wait and the types of teenage movies, 10 Things I Hate About You, like all of this type of films that were coming out at that point that were about like supposedly about the teenage experience, and this sort of does a great job of satirizing it. Like it has some of the familiar beats. Like there's the hallway walk with the soundtrack, and there's the, you know, all the things that we would see in a lot of the movies either from the late 90s or even into the 80s. But it has like, it's almost like Uncanny Valley where it's real, but then there's something off about the whole thing. And as I guess watching this now, I really appreciated the way in which it did sort of skewer that kind of trend at the time.
Yeah. Well, and Mary Beth touched on this too, that there's sort of this surrealist lens over the whole thing. And satirizing is a great way of putting it, because you're absolutely right, where it's the other teen movies that you're listing. And I mean, 10 Things I Hate About You is obviously a great movie, but
they're great. But
said, you know, all of those movies were so focused on like sex and sex being like the marker of coming of age, which is not the only way that happens, and don't really delve into mental illness and the darker parts, and also the ways in which the adults in the picture and the society at large frame what the teens are going through.
Yeah. Well, we don't have the rose-colored glasses that a lot of them have, like the perfect bedrooms, the perfectly curated outfits. Like everything looks like an ad in like a Delia's catalog from the early 2000s. Like I want, you know, like Princess Diaries. I always wanted her room and all that stuff. But this exactly. But like all of those movies were just such like even though it was like they're being bullied, they were idealized visions of what it means to be a teen. And while obviously Donnie Darko is by no means a real movie, it still hits that groundedness of like the actual teen experience of like, I moved here because my stepdad stabbed my mom and we had to change our names and go into witness protection. Like, good God. Like it's hard to be a teenager, and people like say that, but I don't think they really like remember, or I think like the generation older than us like doesn't remember, or I guess also being teenagers in the early 2000s fucking sucked. I can't imagine what it's like to be a teenager right now. Are you fucking kidding me? With all the social media, fuck that.
You're
sorry. My cat's trying to get out. My husband is trying to let the cat out, and now they're playing a fun game of peekaboo that she now thinks. I know. She thinks it's a game. I know. She's like, it's a game. And he's like, no, I'm trying to get you to go in or out of the room.
Amazing. I love very much cat on brand for the cat. No, you're absolutely right.
But before we have to wrap up, I do want to hear about your theories about like what is going on here. Like tell me,
Same mind.
Yeah.
Okay, so I could be totally, absolutely wrong, and I'm sure someone's gonna listen to this and scream at me, and that's fine. I can't hear you. It's not my business. My theory, my theory slash what I've gleaned from deep dives and YouTube, like video essays and commentaries and whatnot, is that because there are different theories on the shape that time takes. So there are movies like Arrival where time is, buckle up, Mary Beth. Look,
I know, I'm ready. I'm ready because time
like,
shit scares the shit out of me. So I'm just like, all right, get
what
in
I'm
the headspace.
saying.
Get in the headspace. Me too,
and I think maybe that's why I fixate on it, because it freaks me the fuck out. So because one of the reasons that Donnie Darko is so existentially scary is because it illustrates that one choice, literally just the choice to not sneak out of your house the night before, everything changes. This pedophile doesn't get discovered. You die instead of your mom never gets on this plane. Like all of these, like there's so many others that I can't think of. It like speaks to the power of the butterfly effect in ways that we'll never even know, where you see all these people at the end and they have this feeling about something, a potential alternate reality, but they can't quite put their fingers on it. And like, maybe that's what deja vu is, like something happening that's been overwritten or in a different timeline. Anyway, so movies like Arrival or like Everything Everywhere All at Once argue that time is, circular and that everything is happening at the same time in layers. Then there are movies that have like multiple worlds interpretation, which looks more like a spider web. And forgive me, you guys have really like unlocked something in me.
No, I love it.
No, please.
This is awesome.
And the spiderweb shape is more like, these are all the potential different things that could happen from like one choice that's done differently at the start. And then movies like Donnie Darko are similar to that, but instead of the lines branching off, they run parallel. So it's the idea that like there are two different realities that run parallel, one in which he's in his bed in the morning when the engine falls in, and one in which he's not. And the theory that I've read that seems accurate is that the engine from a plane in one of the timelines moves through a wormhole into the other timeline and lands there. And so it's not that Donnie is overwriting the timeline that he's in, it's that he's like jumping into a different timeline, is one of the theories I've heard.
Wow.
Yes. And he has to fix it. Like, and that's why the way it ends the way it does, because it's like he branched off the timeline the wrong way. And this is all of them like trying to get him back into the right timeline. So he does die, so he can like not kill the world by completely like destroying.
But he has the choice.
He has the choice. So there is a choice. So I know I said earlier that there's no choice and that like everything it feels predestined, because parts of it do a little bit, especially with the weird like goo shit that comes out of everyone's chests. Yeah,
that's what I was gonna say, because it's weird. We're like, there are choices, but there aren't at the same time. It's almost like like they're in the time, and all the different versions of Donnie's life, for example, all of those paths are predetermined, but which path he ends up on is influenced by what choice he makes. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, because I was wondering as I finished watching it last night, I was like, because the movie is very focused on predestination, or it brings in the idea of God into it, about everything is preordained and there's nothing that we can do, and those the sort of abyss-like things coming out of people's chests, moving them around, seems to suggest that everyone is on this preordained path. And of course, then by the end of the movie, he makes a choice, and so there's like. So I was like, is this trying to say that there is none? But then also the question is, was he being led on this path all along? Because isn't the reason that he woke up in the middle of the road that one time is because of Frank, who wouldn't be Frank if he, so like, it's like it's like a rabbit hole. I mean,
time shit fucking sucks, because once you start thinking about it too hard, you find the word, like the holes in
paradox.
It. Because obviously, it's all fucking like, it's all theoretical, because none of us know any of this. So we're just like, who knows? It's all just it's all a crapshoot.
Well, and I love stuff like that, because that's like movies like Time Crimes is a great one. If
Time Crimes is so good.
It's so good. And one of my favorites is Triangle. If you've seen that
I
one.
still haven't seen Triangle, but I
I've
really
not seen
want to. Melissa
Triangle.
George is in it, and I love her.
I wish I hadn't brought it up then, because me just putting it in this category ruins one twist of it for you already. But I do recommend watching it. It's a lot of fun. But
Okay.
Time Crimes is a good example of like that everything that happens only happens because of the other things that happen. Like the stuff that happens at the beginning only happens because of the stuff that happens at the end. And I feel like the real argument in Donnie Darko, like whether or not I'm totally off, which I could be, because you're right, no one really knows, and I'm sure that there are people who have done way deeper dives on this than I have. I feel like the main argument that it's making is that whatever time is shaped like, it's not linear. And whether or not we have free will, I'm not sure what it says about free will. I'd have to think about that more. What do you guys think?
This is kind of coming up in my brain as we're talking, because I feel like it kind of is an interesting way to frame, like, there's two things I'm thinking. One is like when she says, she being Jenna Malone's character, when she goes, oh, it has like a superhero name, and he goes, oh, what, like maybe I am. And there is kind of like this weird superhero vibe to this movie, which I think is really interesting, of like, he does kind of have superpowers. Like he somehow granted, for some reason, he's granted like different access.
And he's a Jesus figure too.
Yeah. Weird. What a weird thing.
I know.
And like, so we have like, obviously that vibe too, but there's also like something there about like teens not having a choice, and then something about like the weight that the weight of the world being put on teenagers, and like what we expect them to do to like save the world, which I know sounds big, but I mean, this came out like right at around when 9/11 happened, which fuck this movie over. But like, obviously this hadn't happened, but it's still a thing of like teenagers being given, like, just watch Evangelion if you like stuff like that, like constantly putting things on a new generation to like save the world or save this or be the ones to discover. Now. Exactly. So there's like, I think it's such an interesting movie about that, about like how rough it is for a teenager, and then on top of that, the world puts extra pressure on top of them, and like, what do you expect to happen to these kids when they're have these high expectations on them that are completely unrealistic? So I think it is kind of like, to me, a very interesting way of examining that kind of thing.
Of like, we look at 18-year-olds and we're like, hey, quick, what do you want to do for the rest of your life? Decide right now. You're going to be trapped.
Sign up to go to the military, or go and get the $100,000 debt forever and go to school and then change your major or never finish. Like,
but also save us from ourselves, because we can't seem to do that. It's like, it's a lot. But then we also like, you're teenagers, you're kids, you're this, you're that, but also you kind of need to save the world. So it perfectly encapsulates.
I mean, that's a really good point, because it's like, where it's like you're given this sense of, you don't know what you want, but we're going to demand that you know what you want at the same time.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah. What do you think, Terry, about what it says about free will?
I don't know. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to bring it up, because I was struggling with it, because there's ways that you could take a look at it as being that, you know, he makes a decision that saves everybody, but it also kind of doesn't, because we have the pedophile that probably is not going to be discovered now at this point. So like, it's like that decision that he makes does really good things. It saves the person that he loves. It saves his mom and his sister from the plane explosion. But like, I don't know. It's so weird, because then you can also go to a cost.
The whole thing is like, there really wasn't a good answer either way, but he loves his I think to me, it was like he loved his family enough to want to at least save them. And like keep them together. Which is also sad, like pure middle child syndrome. As someone who had a very depressed middle brother, I'm like, oh, Jamie, I'm so sorry. I can only imagine what you felt like, middle brother having to like. The dynamics are very funny in that family, because that's like me and my brother are very close in age, like him and his Donnie Darko and his sister, and then they had a younger sibling because we had a much younger brother. So it's watching this now, I'm like, oh wow, the dynamics are very similar to what we had in high school.
The characters are written so well.
They are. But I also wondered this time if he didn't really make a choice, because he shows up in bed and he just starts laughing, right? It's like, of course, this is how it's going to end.
Which I love. He's like absurd. He's like laughing at he's like has figured out like the absurdity of being alive, which is so also darkly funny and depressing.
It is, but it's also one of those things where it's like, did he really have a choice in this, or is this where he was always meant to end up? So like,
Yeah.
it's a puzzle box, and that's what I think that's what I really love about the movie is that
Me
we
too.
can have all these discussions, and who knows who's right and who knows who's wrong.
Yeah.
Some of the intense fans out there might think that their answer is right, but like,
Yeah, but we can't.
It's
I
up
mean,
there.
I would argue that as like my final sort of thought about this is that I think it almost says that we can't know whether we have free will or not, because like whether I decide to put on my right or my left shoe first, what I end up doing was always going to be what I was going to do. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
It hurts my brain to think about, and that's why I love it so much.
I know,
Yeah,
I'm just
same.
like, my eyes twitching. Have you seen
know.
Coherence, Jenna?
Oh my God.
Okay, cool.
I was going to mention
I
that
figured you
movie.
had seen it, but I was like, okay, I have to ask if they like these kinds of movies. Hopefully, I've seen Coherence.
Listen, my partner literally says, find someone who looks at you the way Jenna looks at watching Coherence for a 50th time. Like I was going to put that on the list, but I was like, no one's ever heard of this. No one knows this movie. I won't do it because like it's so
I love the movie.
It's such a
I'm
good movie.
Obsessed with that fucking movie.
It's
and honestly,
so
that movie is
fucking
also a good companion piece to this because it also argues, you know, for like separate timelines that for one moment in time have an opportunity to intersect and to interfere with each other, but normally don't.
So good.
Okay, we have reached the end of our time here, but this has been so awesome. Let's give our ratings really quick out of 5. Terry, quickly, how many suck-a-fucks out of 5 do you give Donnie Darko?
Again, the dialogue in this movie is just so perfect. I was not expecting that to come out of the characters' mouths at the very beginning. I don't remember which one says it, but the suck a fuck, or it's like, you're such
Tell
a
me,
fuck
Elizabeth,
ass.
how does one suck a fuck?
How does one suck a fuck?
What's a
Or the fuck ass.
And everyone starts laughing.
Fuck ass.
Oh, it's such a
So
good
good.
introduction to a family where like they're all like fucking with each other, but they're also kind of laughing. Anyway.
Dukakis.
So good. Yeah. Okay, but yeah, so when I was adding this to Letterboxd, I had put it on there before and I had given it a 2-star rating, and I'm like,
Wow.
I'm like, why did I do that? And so rewatching this, I was very happy to just delete that. And this is a gosh, I'm just gonna do it. It's 5. It's 5 suck-a-fucks. I was surprised at how much I enjoyed this on a rewatch, and I do think some of the pacing is a little off in the middle section. But other than that, I think what this movie is doing and the conversations that it elicits out of people is really good. And what a cast! Like I was like Drew Barrymore, Noah Wyle, Patrick Swayze.
I know. Drew Barrymore
Seth
looking
Rogen.
the same age that she does now.
What the fuck was
Because
that?
she's
I know. I was
right.
like, I'm sorry, was this made yesterday? Like you
Yeah.
look identical. What the
Talk
hell?
about timelines. She's doing it as a cosmic joke because she jumped timelines.
Good
He's
for
like,
her, honestly.
"It's
Good for
meta."
her.
And I was so happy to see Mary McDonnell, who I loved in Battlestar Galactica. And so revisiting this and being like, oh, that's Mary McDonnell. Just so good. So this 5 suck-a-fucks. What about you, Mary Beth?
She's so good in this movie too. I love her as
She really
the mom.
is.
And Beth Grant just acting her fucking ass off. She's the
Ugh.
Sparklelution lady.
She always acts her
Kitty.
ass
So
off.
good.
Though.
Always.
She always
She
is. She's so she's
Yeah.
in The Office too. Anyway, I give
So
this
good.
4.5 suck-a-fucks. I cried. It's very funny watching these movies now that I am officially in my 30s, where I'm like, I'm not gonna feel that differently. And I'm like, I'm sobbing. I'm like, wow, maybe I'm full of shit.
Who
Which
am
is like
I?
kind of nice. You know, I'm always like, it's not going to be that different watching this like the last 10 years. And I'm like, oh, wow, no, a lot has changed. And I love that, though. Like, I still love it. And I love it even more, like seeing the intricacies of it and seeing it as more than just like a meme generator, but as something that's like an actually incredibly smart, funny, and bleak look at what it means to be a teenager, especially in that like very weird, and I mean, still weird now, really unknown time period. It's not much different than now. So yeah. I'm so glad that you chose this movie for us to talk about and like gave me an opportunity to rewatch it because it was delightful to revisit this. So
I'm so happy you were down.
Oh yeah. Yeah. You know the final word? So how many suck-a-fucks, Jenna, do you give?
I would give this 6 out of 5 suck-a-fucks. I fucking ride so hard for this movie. I love it so much. It's not perfect. There, it could absolutely be more inclusive. Like there are things about it that are very of its time, but I still fucking love it so much. And I mean, I even as you're talking, I was thinking about like the scene with the one teacher, like there's Drew Barrymore and there's like the one other teacher who actually like
the science teacher.
Yeah. And how the science teacher is the science teacher and Drew Barrymore are like ostracized by the other adults because they're like the two adults that are willing to say, I don't know. And like, that's the thing is that all these other adults around them insist on saying, this is the answer. I know the answer. It's religion. It's science. And then the two of them are the only ones willing to say like, I don't know. And anyone who says they do is lying to you. And like that, the science teacher is the one who's like, religion and science, like, might be different words for similar things, and like there might be overlap, and like science is all magic until we understand it, and and showing that it's like the organized parts of religion that are the problem, and not necessarily like the sense of awe and wonder and lack of understanding, and like the problem with religion more being that we like feel the need to know and we can't sit in unknowing, and how like which is sort of meta about the movie. Like it forces you to sit in unknowing, and that's uncomfortable for us.
Well, and there's such a great foil, sorry, but like there's such a great foil to Kitty with her binary choice of love and fear, right? It's like, no, it's everything in between those. So I just, it's great. But we could just keep talking about this movie for like the next hour, but we
absolutely
do have to let you go. But thank you so much for joining us to talk about your movie as well as Donnie Darko. Are you online? Where can our listeners find you? And the floor is yours to plug away with whatever you can talk about.
Thank you. Yes, I am on Instagram as Squid Enthusiast, as in someone who is really enthusiastic about squids, because they're very cool. Big fan of
squids. Cephalopods are great.
Cephalopods are so fucking cool. Okay, we'll have to do that next time because clearly I could talk to you guys for hours. So I'm Squid Enthusiast. Last name is spelled Kanell. And you can find out more about Faceless After Dark on facelessafterdark.com. I post about it on my Instagram, but facelessafterdark.com is where you can find out more about the limited theatrical release, where it will be playing, and more importantly, where you can stream it, because it'll be streaming digitally this Friday, May 17th through Dark Sky Films. And I can't wait for people to see it. It will hopefully also make you think, but in different ways.
Hell yeah, everyone. And we'll have all of that info in the show notes too. So you'll have all of the links right there.
Thank you.
So please check it out, everybody, especially if you like cool, weird, meta slasher home invasion, things that defy subgenre labels. It's great. But listeners, you've heard from us. We want to hear from you. What was your experience with Donnie Darko? Send us an email at scarredforlifepodcast@gmail.com or reach out to us directly on social media. I am at MB McAndrews on Twitter and at nb.mcandrews on Instagram.
And I'm at Gaily Dreadful everywhere.
And of course, you better be following the podcast on Twitter and Blue Sky at Scarred Podcast, and on Instagram at Scarred for Life Podcast.
And please don't forget to review, rate, and subscribe. And if you want to help support us, we do have a Patreon.
Thank you to Eric Power for our artwork. Thank you to Sean Keller for our music. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Please stay safe out there. Most importantly, stay creepy.
And until next time.